And there we go. So to let you know, I am Holly Hackett-Rich, she, her. I am the Director of Grants and Outreach here with the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council. We serve 7 counties, as south as Aiken, north to I Falls, over to Grand Portage, and absolutely everything in between. It's a vast area. It is in my heart of hearts the most beautiful area in the country. And we exist because our mission is the belief that where there are arts, you will thrive. Arts add to the quality of life. And in the state of Minnesota, we are one of the few states that it was voted in, and there's a percentage, a small percentage of a percentage that is set aside for the development of arts in the state of Minnesota. No other state does this. And our arts economically rival the mining and the agriculture, which a lot of people find surprising. But so we are very, very lucky to be here. We exist to help people develop their grant writing, to develop the arts in and of themselves, to share, and it's all good. Miri and now Miri is our grant specialist. She helps people. I help people. We help people develop their projects, find their language, help them read their grants, provide feedback for that. And we're just really here to help people grow. So that being said, so I did my introduction. Mary, would you like to do your introduction? Oh, Mary, we can't hear you, or at least
yeah. There. Now you can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Multiple buttons. Yeah, I'm having like a vague migraine aura, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I just hope my eyesight stays to be able to
well,
talk.
if it gets getting rough, I talk.
Yeah, no, I'll let you know. Like, I think my eyesight is good for now, but if it goes, then it's just gone. But anyway, that's my introduction. I'm Miri Villiard. I am a grant writing specialist here at ARAC. I used to serve on the board. I've been awarded grants by ARAC in my practice as a visual artist. I do a lot of community engaged artwork, I guess. So mostly in the form of painting or using paint to make stuff and connect with community. And yeah, used to work at the American Indian Community Housing Organization before working here, and I was the arts and cultural program coordinator there. So I have a little bit of experience in doing the, nonprofit arts curation role, a little bit of experience being an artist. Well, I guess a lot of experience being an artist.
I was gonna say, come now. If you see a mural in Duluth, probably 7 times out of 10, Miri's gonna have a hand in it. So, cool. Yeah. Miri is an incredible artist.
I'm all right. And then a lot of panel experience. And so relatively new here at ARAC, and looking to help artists and arts organizations participate in a healthy arts economy and arts
more starving artists.
Yeah, and learn more kind of about what we have to offer here, as well as like other resources that are out there for community. So today
I'm going to hang on just one moment. And Bethany, what is your discipline or your art practice, or what brings you to this workshop?
I've been doing watercolor here recently, and I guess it's just you two. So I'm not worried about like humble bragging or whatever. I'm just gonna, at the end of this month, I'm taking a bunch of stuff up for my first show ever to the Edge Center in Big.
Good for you.
Thank you. And I also got in at Virginia in July. So, and if you want to read about me, I was in, what was it, Voyage Minnesota magazine, Meet the Artist for May. And that might be better than me talking. If you want, it doesn't matter. But I really would like to give this a go as something professional. I am working on 2 books that are essentially done. They just need to be fleshed out. It's just been something that I've always excelled at. That was never, what do you call that? Not accepted, but like no one was ever really behind me until recently. So, and it has just come so much easier than everything else that I was kind of pushed to do. Like my family really wanted me to be a STEM girl, and it just,
No, I think STEAM is really good. They need to add a. It all goes together, right?
right. And so, speaking of grants, like I understand a little bit of how grant writing works just because of my experiences, my brief experiences in college. So yeah, I thought this would probably be a very logical next step, grant writing. So
Yes, and just to let you know, like you can reach out to either Miriam or myself, and you can find our contact information on the website.
okay.
And there's a lot of information there, and we have individual grants, and then we have organizational grants, and then we have a couple that kind of are both, so like arts learning, an individual can teach it or a community can hold it. Or so this is a little bit different than writing personal, but you can also go to our resource tab, and if you do the drop down, there's workshops, and there are some existing personal workshops, how to write for yourself personally.
Okay.
But you can always reach out to us, ask questions, and we can set up Zooms. We're here to help.
Okay.
From the person Steve typically answers the phone. He's our artist resource manager. He's the first step. He's the IT guy. He can get you going. And Mary and I are a little more deeper into the language and developing of the project.
Okay.
I would say. Would you say, Mary?
A
little bit.
A lot of it.
So, and you're getting both sides. I am an artist, but I am not a working artist. That is not how I earn my money, because this takes a lot of time. Miri is a working artist. So we're bringing those 2 points of view to these workshops.
All right.
So Miri, take it away.
Yeah, and feel free to chime in if you have questions sort of along the way. As Holly said, this one is more for the specifically for like the nonprofit grant writing or working within an organization. But still, as an individual artist, I've pulled a lot of the information on like criteria and like how to write a grant and put it into here. So got both perspectives there. But yeah, so today we're kind of going to talk about who and what gets funding, how to prepare, the upcoming funding opportunities that we have opening up, I think this week, and then some examples of kind of like what not to do, a couple examples of successful grants in the past and language that's been used for organizations, specifically like how to connect with artists, and then tips for organizations that might not be art specific. So examples of fundable things. In my more individualized one, I had it kind of split between projects and non-projects. And you can find that workshop in the little workshop tab on the website. But for the grants we're talking about today, they fund more project specific things. So it can be basically anything that has sort of like a start and a finish to it. you know, exhibits, films, let's see, lots of events get applied for in the grants that we'll be talking about today. Classes and research, participant costs, things like that. And then again, for the perspective of organizations, you know, these grants are useful for paying artists and volunteers and instructors. This is our big long list, although it's not that terribly long, of ineligible things, again, for the grants that we'll be talking about today. So any project that's attempting to influence any state or federal legislation, activities that involve out of state travel, anything that requires like excessive entry or exhibition fees. So that's like, you know, outside of a ticket cost, like something that's just unreasonable or not affordable for most people.
For instance, I'll jump in here since you're looking at books. If someone says, oh, sure, we will, you know, join us and we will take you through this process, and it's $900 to join. That's outlandish. And so part of that is not just to say, we're not doing this to join this, but to say, guard against being taken advantage of with those kinds of exorbitant fees.
Okay.
Yeah, projects promoting religious socialization, something that was supported by state general fund appropriation. So that's if it, you know, if you're double dipping into the Minnesota State Arts Board and ARAC for the same project. Let's see, if it's designed for a private audience and not open to the general public, don't cover construction costs, over anything that's over $600 worth of equipment or to purchase real property. Is it real estate property or just real property?
Yeah, anything that is permanent. So we can't, and even this $600 worth of equipment, we're going to be revisiting that one just because that was set a long time ago and prices have gone up, and we've all understood the need for technology and things like that. So going into our next biennial, that may change or be eliminated. But if you pay yourself to do things, we don't make you prove what you do with that money. So that's an option. One thing I was going to go back to reiterate from the things that have once been supported by the state general fund or supported by the state in any way, and this is mostly as it applies to schools. So let's say you wanted to do an after school watercolor class for kids, and you wanted to buy things, you wanted to pay yourself, and you wanted to provide this for them. If that had already been provided by the school, then it doesn't qualify. Yeah. And part of the reasoning behind that is because schools get art funding. Our funding is for the larger community. And what we don't want is them taking less and less away, because if our money goes to the schools, then the schools don't get as much and we're not getting as much. So they need to stay in their lane and we can supplement. Unfortunately, many schools are losing a lot of their funding. So we always talk about that. Talk with us first so we make sure you're not having language that's going to get you in trouble.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that point. Go ahead, Miriam. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, the other two things that are ineligible in these specific grant rounds are general operating support, probably because there is a general operating support grant already and opportunities for that elsewhere. And then funds that are requested for a project that serves as a benefit or a fundraiser. So you don't want, I feel like we talk to people and we're not looking to fund a cause or fund a fundraiser for a cause. It's specifically funding for the arts aspect. I don't know if that necessarily means like you can't have a fundraiser happening in the other room, but like the focus of what we're putting our logo on can't be that fundraiser at all. So.
Right. And that's again where we're here for questions to kind of skirt that difference?
Yeah, for organization grants, who's eligible, so we have state registered and federally recognized nonprofits and tax exempt organizations, accredited schools, tribal governments, units of government, and then if you're an informal organizer or group, as long as you have a fiscal sponsor, which I think there's a whole page on our website of like how to work with fiscal sponsors, who falls under this category, then you also can apply, but you just have to have like, you know, their permission, and the check would be written to the organization to then work with you to distribute funds.
And that's, so for instance, you'll find if you start Googling around or say go out on the social medias, you'll find in many areas, especially in the rural areas, it'll be Friends of the Arts in Aiken. And those are those informal artist groups. Some of them will move and make themselves a 501c3. Some of them will just find an art organization that already is a nonprofit and just kind of umbrella underneath them. And as Mary said, when you get into it, there's a link that explains the ins and outs of fiscal sponsorship. And there's a lot of willing places too.
Yeah, I think there's even, you know, I did a fundraiser for one of my projects, and there was a website called In Your Own Backyard. It's just ioby.org, and they did things where you could, it was like a GoFundMe website where you could fundraise for your project, but then if you also, like, if you didn't have a fiscal sponsor, they also offered like fiscal sponsorship for like community arts related projects, which is kind of cool. So there's some organizations, I think even, I don't know if Springboard does or not, but I feel like I've seen a link somewhere on Springboard for the Arts that they have lists of people who do fiscal sponsorship.
And boy, if anyone did, that would be Springboard. Bethany, definitely look at Springboard. We have them linked on our resource page too.
Okay.
And one thing I will tell you about Springboard, kind of bang around in their site a little bit, because you got to go kind of deep, and you will hit a resource page to end all resource pages. So any discipline, medium, modality, whatever you're trying to do, they have a link for. Not to mention the fact they're an economic organization for artists, and they have things, they will give you, I forget what it is. You get like a free 1 hour consultation on your artist career, or things on a sliding scale. They'll hook you up. They give places you can find health insurance, places you can find legal. So they're really, really an absolutely fantastic organization.
Let's see if I can grab that list real quick. All of my stuff. Let's see, marketing and press. Finding out resources. And so I'll drop this link in the chat.
Okay.
But yeah, so they have, you click Thrive as an artist. Oh wait, no. Well, yeah, this is their website anyway.
And they provide so many wonderful workshops. We're going to do, you know, ours are similar in following them, but they're constantly offering them, and you can just jump into them. They're free, lots of good legal advice, copyrights, things of that nature. So.
All right.
Right. Back to this. It is so weird navigating new computers.
I'm so glad you're doing it and not me. Thank you.
So much stuff you don't remember you have to set up. Yeah. So right now these are upcoming organization grants, although if are any of these open to individuals too, Holly?
Arts learning can be individual.
Okay.
That's individual and organization. Art project and rural and community art project are for organizations or communities.
So those are all opening on the 19th. Each of them is about, $5,000 or up to $5,000. You don't have to apply for the full amount, but people obviously like to, because why not?
No,
Uh,
no, I have too much money.
For arts learning, it's intended to support high quality, age appropriate arts education and increase knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts. These can occur in a wide range of community venues. For art projects, it's really like kind of when we talked about like the project, it's something with a start and an end, and it's any medium. Could be a performance or an arts event, or yeah, contracting with the services of other organizations or individuals. That is like it is the least specific, I think, grant we have, both for individuals and for organizations. However, the date that, or the deadline that's coming up is for organizations right now. And then rural and community art spaces, this is for organizations that exist outside of Duluth, right? In our region.
They're
So,
essentially the same. Art Project Duluth can, because Duluth is considered the metro of our region. So naturally we have a higher population. The artists migrate here because of opportunity and things like that. So we spend a great deal of our time making sure to limit, so it's not this overabundance of just Duluth. We need everybody's voices. We need everyone represented. So the rural and community, very similar to Art Project, but you have to be rural. No one from Duluth can do that. So it's kind of, apples and oranges of things. You can also apply as a rural, you can apply into Art Project. There's nothing against that. But we just unfortunately have to limit the amount that goes to Duluth.
So a lot of them have really similar sort of criteria that they're looking at, but basically with grants, all grants are evaluated ideally solely on the criteria that is set forth for the applicants to read through. Artistic vision, it's weighted at 30% of your score. It's the artistic concept behind your project, the artistic quality of the artists or the groups involved. So there'll be a lot of questions around, who's involved and what makes their work worthwhile in presenting. Appropriateness to the community served, I'll kind of dive into in another slide. It's basically the whole intention of the project and evaluating that. And then we have impact and evaluation, which is 40% of your score. And that's basically the value to the community and how it's engaging the community. And what is your plan to actually see that, that impact happen?
Can you guys hear that?
Huh?
Can you guys hear that? Is that about? It's thunder.
Ooh.
Oh,
Okay.
got my window.
We all look.
I just
Yeah.
didn't want it to be like bothering you guys.
Oh yeah, no,
Well, it's just your stomach growling. It's okay.
yeah. And then your ability, which is basically going to be measured by the budget. So making sure the numbers make sense in the budget you submit. When you have adequate supporting materials, I think, for some of the applications, there's like letters of confirmation that you can submit. And so those are always really helpful. And that's kind of like the bonus stuff that really, I always tell people when they apply for grants to think about if you're going to like say in the evaluation that you are tying with another organization or individual, like what about it in your application is going to make it stand out. And it's going to be a lot, I think, around like ability and, how thorough you are in answering and providing supporting materials to your application. And then, again, a lot of this will be in, narrative form. So basically how you've articulated everything and your readiness to undertake the project. Under arts learning, I think really the only significant criteria that's a little different is the educational value. So the quality, significance, and appropriateness of the arts instruction for the learners. And I think for arts learning, we request a curriculum now, right? It wasn't always like.
Right. It needs to be a little specific, and it can't be a curriculum that's being added to an accredited school. It can't be used towards a schoolwork. But if you wanted, just as an example, to do an after-school program, let's say you wanted to teach watercolor to kids, you would need essentially a curriculum. Like you said, you need, this week is this project, a breakdown of the time frame, the goals you're trying to meet, and the target audience. How do you find those people? And even if you're a novice, let's say you don't have a teaching degree, you can teach these things, but you need to bring some sort of evidence of, that you've done it casually here or there or whatever. And then is most of the supporting events. So let's say I've talked to the local school and they'll let us use their art studio. Best thing to do is then have an email, a letter, whatever it needs, saying, yep, I've agreed to let Bethany use this thing for 4 weeks, those kinds of things. So it's showing us and it's showing the reviewers that you have already put these wheels into motion. You have already talked to people, you have agreements. So those people are also going to hold you accountable to it. It's like, it's more than us, because we're not particularly, over someone's back, making sure they're doing things, we leave it up to you. But if you see, yep, she's not just saying she's talked to so-and-so, she's proving she talked to so-and-so. So those are those big pieces, I think, that make a difference in a grant. So if you just vaguely say, I'm going to paint watercolors for 4 weeks to so-and-so, and it's going to be great, that is going to be very weak compared to the person who is, I'm going to go through simple color theory. I'm going to go through, just different washes, to what different brushes do, abstract, on and on. You can do whatever, but it has to be more considerate. You are telling the story of your project. We're reading the story of your project. And always remember that, because we have peer review panels. So, somebody who writes a book may have no understanding how difficult watercolor can be and what it involves. So you want to lay things out very clearly. I always, certain things I'm always like, talk to me like I'm 4, go through what is an obvious step to you in your art practice may not be to others. So to be as, kind of upfront and obvious, and less kind of like, sometimes the artists tend to get very huge with everything. And it's like, yes, but what does that mean when you're painting? So those are things, and a lot of people have trouble with it. And that's where Miri and I can help you take those big dreams and everything and break them down into tangible pieces.
Yeah. I was just thinking of all the times people have, when people find out you're an artist, especially for visual artists, and they're like, I can't even draw a stick person or whatever. Like, imagine you're kind of writing to people like that, like, breaking it down to someone who's like, I can't draw a stick person. Well,
here's how one begins. Do you start with the back or the head?
Whichever you choose is your style. Like,
right.
I just pulled up this is an example of someone who got funded in the arts learning in the past, and I think they had more than this, but I just like their layout of how they answered the question around, like, I think there's a question around like, what are your learning goals for the arts learners or the participants? And so they said, through continued practice of the objectives and skills in this lesson, students will gain confidence as singers and performers. So then, when they get to the measurement portion, there's some way that they're measuring, like, well, how do we know that the students got more confident in their performance? And they might have used like surveys or one-on-one conversations with the teachers or things like that. But it's something that you can kind of measure, is that confidence as a singer or performer. And then students will better understand their personal vocal mechanism and learn what leads to consistent and beautiful vocal production. And I think specifically in this grant, they did a lot around like breathing and like learning to sing from your diaphragm and like head voice and all this. So like they explained all of these different concepts in their curriculum that they were going to be teaching. And it's like, intro to vocal stuff. I'm not a visual artist. I don't know what it's called, but I got the sense, in reading it, intro to vocal stuff. I get it, how you draw that circle in the stick and make the stick figure. Only for singing. And then, I threw this here for that one part because appropriateness for communities, especially with organizations, it tends to come up a lot in panels that I've served on, because there's lots of movements to serve like underserved communities, but then it's like oftentimes from organizations that maybe don't have those relationships in the first place, and they think it's cool to reach out, but then there's nothing in their narrative that outlines like, well, how are you going to do this in a genuine way beyond just writing a cool grant that is a hot button issue or a hot button community to work with. So examples of things to not really do are, if you're an organization that historically hasn't served Black, Indigenous, people of color audiences that suddenly wants to host an event for those communities, but doesn't have any like plan for outreach.
I like the saying that I think captures this, is that anything, wait a minute, I gotta go right. Something for us without us is not about us. Did I say that right? It's like you can't go in and say, I'm gonna do this wonderful thing because, like, let's say somebody thinks they see a way they can solve a problem. They see a problem in my world. So then they're going to move to solve this problem, but they're not going to engage me and ask, is this a problem? What is the priority? What is my part of this thing? So, don't do that. If be of the project, or be of the community, or certainly engage and let the community lead.
And there's nothing wrong with like wanting to provide more services or reach out to a community that you haven't worked with before. There's just like a way to do it that's not exploitive for grant purposes. There's genuine ways, and like if you're at the beginning level, then that's okay. Like, make that understood kind of in your grant and demonstrate ways that you're trying to actually do the outreach or do the elimination of barriers for participants. So another example I've seen, and these are all examples of things that I've sat on panels and I'm like, yeah, no, go back and like work on this a little bit more. Like charging excessive fees for an event or performance that is for like low-income communities. So like I've seen people who are like, I'm going to bring this whole symphony to this like really poor community and we're going to charge this much for tickets. And I'm like, well, where's the connection and how you're going to get people who can't afford those tickets in there? Are you going to offer scholarships? Are you going to like, do some additional programming, things like that? And then, as a mirror, oh yeah. What is it?
Isn't that children are free labor? What are you talking about? What are they for?
Who are you, my dad?
Oh my God. Oh, this one is always like, personal to me as like a kid who participated in a lot of like public or tried to participate in public art stuff as a kid, and then like adults would take credit for it. And so like now that I am in like this position of a professional adult, artist, I always try and think of ways like to either compensate youth or like make it so it's not just like I need to get paint on the wall and these kids I can use to do it for free, and then not give them anything in return. So if you're gonna engage youth, like make sure that they get something out of it.
Beyond character.
Yeah,
Or
you're building character and strength. We
Or
see
like-
things like t-shirts or, some sort of a participation, so they can take pride, because what this does too, Miri and I had done something with some kids or had met with this recreation group, and they have a school on one side of the road, an older assisted living place on the other side. And it's like, what a wonderful opportunity to bridge those two generation gaps, to come together to do this mural in their community. And when those things happen, as Mary can attest to, too, there's pride in that, and your murals aren't going to get attacked. You're not going to do things because the whole community is there to support it, and they're proud of that. So just even instilling in them, that they can sign their name to it, that they're part of this, they have ownership in their community.
Well, and art isn't this like really, separate thing that you're not allowed to touch or be a part of, or like, you're not allowed to,
Yeah.
be exist within, but also too, like, there's a reason people think that artists are like, we have the stereotype of the starving artist, and like people think that people really undervalue like what it costs to be an artist and what we should be paying artists. And part of my theory is because we're like, we get all this free art for kids, and then they just think like, oh, this isn't a job, this is just what you do for fun. So
Well, and so that's I am often stumping for the no more starving artists. And
Yeah.
because for so long, and I was, and we have a workshop on this where it's like things to watch out for and to not be taken advantage. A lot of places will say, hey, do it, you'll get like advertising for it or promotion for it. No. And an artist said to me one day, and it has stuck with me, and I'm like, that's absolutely right. And they said, I didn't wake up with this talent. Now, most people have some sort of talent or an interest that will drive them that way, right? But they're like, I didn't wake up at this level of talent. I work at this. I went to school for this. I practice this daily. I put the time into it. This is my job. And so explaining to other people that, no, you're just not giving it away. And, I do a lot of I make a lot of my Christmas gifts because it's important to me and personal. And so I made some beautiful mittens for my sister. And then she's like, can you make me 5 more pairs for XYZ? Because they think it's just easy. And I'm like, let me restate that. Here is 8 hours of my life and
Right.
very expensive yarn. So if you're willing to pay me, because it takes time, and we just have to educate people that, and we can quit being humble about it.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have trouble, I am offering my services as the mama bear to explain to any business or any place else that artists deserve to be paid as everyone else does.
Yeah, the amount of times I've like busted out like, construction equipment, like level scaffolding, and had people ask me like, is this a volunteer project for school? It's like, oh, where do you think I got all these materials that I'm literally up here like assembling huge scaffolding that I had to rent, that had to be delivered on a big truck, stuff like that.
I mean, huge stuff, and people don't understand all of that. And also just as a side note, and it's probably going to be somewhere else here, Mary, but as a side note, those large projects for communities typically are not going to be covered by one singular grant. You're going to have donations from people, you're going to have in kind, but you're going to have maybe a grant because this phase of it, you got a grant from this foundation. This phase of it, you get a grant. I mean, because Mary, how many you've had, what, 10 different things to get one?
One project, yeah. 13
That explains why stuff like that takes so long in the community sometimes. That all makes sense now.
Yeah. And then you need that person. Miri, for instance, is amazing at coordinating people. You know, knowing those people, you build those support systems, and she just does a fabulous job at coordinating people. I think maybe it's like herding cats. I don't think I have that particular talent. Miri has it.
just barely. Lots of grant extensions. So grant are things. So like if you don't finish your project within a timeline, generally like that's a thing you can do. You can reach out to your funders, and it's not ideal, but stuff happens. Like the pandemic happened. There's a lot of people who are still working on probably grants that they got like mid-pandemic that, you know, COVID turned
So
on its
many.
head. No,
I mean,
myself.
most people will work. We work within our constraints of the state and things like that. We can offer extensions. If something falls through completely, we can help them focus on their goals and redirect it into a similar project or something that's still attaining those goals. Because we're not here, you know, we don't want the money back. That's why we take a lot of care in these review panels that this is going to be a successful project. Go use that money.
Mhm.
And if you can't figure out how, we'll help you figure out how.
That's cool. That's a bit less brutal than scientific grants, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you just,
Like, give us our money back.
yes, you'll find very few of us in white coats around here being very stiff.
Yeah, usually there's a way to work things, because again, like that's kind of why we have too, like the goals. When you have goals that make sense, you don't always have to make something in the same way to achieve the same goal, if that makes sense.
Yes,
So,
it does.
but yeah, this is an example. Probably won't read through the whole thing, but it's a breakdown of like, we'll ask in the beginning of the narrative to just describe your proposed project. And I think the most successful grants obviously kind of answer those elementary school questions that we learned of like who, what, where, when, and how. They include a little bit of like, who is the audience that you're trying to reach? What's the context? Like, why is it important in this specific community? And then I really like grants that include like a little piece of data, like one sentence of data from a report or a statistic, or they include a quote that sort of like, I mean, takes reviewers out of like reading this narrative from just you and see like some evidence of someone else who validates this. So like this was for like a fiddling contest that happened. And they kind of went through, they gave all the dates of like where things were going to happen, what it was leading up to. They wrote something about I guess why it was important. That might have been in another section. But then at the end, they just put this nice little filler of like, you know, the venue is superb, of course, and your sound man is the best we've ever had in a competition anywhere. So like, just someone who participated in that space in the past who was like, yeah, like use this for this kind of thing again. Just a good strategy. But yeah, just remembering who, what, where, when. Don't forget any of those because someone will ask about one of those. This is part of another little talk we've given about like measurable outcomes, but it's like the most tripped up part of grant writing. I think whether you're an organization or an individual, people always mess up on questions around evaluation, because I think artists and people who love the arts get so wrapped up in like that emotional and that like, you know, the intangible,
Yeah. The
beauty of
internalized feelings,
the human condition.
human
And-
condition.
I would avoid using the term human condition because it gets a little old. And you know, what part of the human condition are you exploring in your work if you're exploring the human condition? Because
Right. It's so big, it's kind of meaningless almost.
It's just too vague. Or people will spend a lot of time telling us that the hideousness of the human condition and all the problems, but we're like, yes, we know. What are you doing? We know this part. What is your project as related to? You know, it's more, you know, it's like we need to understand what the tangible things you are going to do.
A lot of this seems to really tie in with like your artist statement and stuff like that. I've read some really vague, weird artist statements. That's like, why did you put this on paper?
Are
yeah,
probably really new artists.
yeah, there's like, yeah, like a human condition thing is probably the moment I got into reviewing grants, it became my biggest pet peeve, because it's like I can't weigh the human condition against the human condition against the human condition when no one is telling me what within that they actually are passionate about. You know, they just want to say like, well, and this leads into outcomes too, of like saying, you know, I want people to feel something when they see my work. And it's like, what specifically do you want them to feel? Because everybody's gonna feel something, like that's a given, that's art.
Yeah.
But like,
Do you want them to feel exhilarated or do you want them to be bored? What is it that you're driving at?
yeah. So yeah, the reason people get confused, I think, with the measurable outcomes is because, you know, you spend that first portion of your narrative really answering the who, what, where, when, and why. And those are like the tangible sort of outcomes that people, that are relatively easy to figure out. Like, I'm going to do 10 paintings. But then when people get to the evaluation question, a lot of people will reiterate like, how, you know, what am I going to measure? Well, I will measure if I made 10 paintings. And it's like, that's not what the question is for. It's not, you know, I'm going to host an exhibit or I'm going to complete an album. Yeah, it says here, the answer you should be giving is not complete the project. That's a given. That's why, you know, you're applying. The whole grant proposal is already implying that you're going to complete the project.
Very good point.
And the State Arts Board, if you dig around on their website and their, they'll give examples of people who've gotten grants from them in the past. I've pulled a few of these.
Whose website?
Oh, the Minnesota State Arts Board. So they're another funder that gets money from the legacy amendment that we get money from. So.
Right, they fund us. They're the big government. They fund us. We also received money from McKnight, and last year got a lovely NEA grant as well. But yeah, the Minnesota State Arts Board is the main. So they give us money and we re-grant it under their guidelines.
So
And
they
if
have
you
some,
look, I'm sorry, and if you look on their page, like she was saying, about midway down any page, they have examples of, you can look at a grant that's been granted in the past. You can look at the language. Yeah, she can see. So she has like grants that were awarded, summaries. So they give you ideas. It's good. It's good inspiration. And then you can look through and see how other people answer things and see other language. We don't like to, or I kind of put the line in the sand. I don't like to share things that our people in our area have written, because while we are a very vast geographical region, the artist community is pretty interlinked. And so there are a lot of people that have worked very, very hard at their grant writing skills and at their projects. And I don't want to expose their hands in their own backyard kind of thing. So that's why I like to direct it to there. Additionally, if you bang around on the internet and find other arts organizations elsewhere, or I love, in terms of art or health, I like to go to Pinterest and use that as my search engine. And they have a lot of good examples from vague, but sometimes, I like to reverse engineer things. I don't like to have to reinvent the wheel. So, it's like some people really have good language. Some person maybe has good visuals. Don't steal them, but that's how you kind of diversify your own.
And I can think of an example of an artist recently who got into a lot of hot water for some other stuff, but they had taken an artist statement, like the lines directly out of another artist statement locally, not in our region, but in the state. And the artist whose statement they stole was on the panel that was reviewed. So obviously to change.
I'm sorry. But what are the odds? Excuse me.
I'll leave it at that, but yeah, that was a thing. So I heard about recently and I was like, ooh, that's rough. But here's some examples, and feel free to steal these because I've kind of stole them from collective places and watered them down. But these are examples of things you can measure and use to fill in that thing. And I feel like there really isn't like a ton of I mean, I guess if you're really creative, there are different ways to fill out an evaluation section of like, what am I going to do to evaluate stuff? But there's people I feel like who have like degrees and like coming up with different evaluation tools and stuff like that. And we're not expecting you to come up with something brand new for how to like evaluate your project. There's lots of tried and true things like surveys and interviews and things like that that are just fine, just make sure it makes sense for what you're doing.
Well, and like I like to tell people, if you think of it in the way that you can attach a number to it. So for instance, a really simple thing like over COVID, and because prior to COVID, a big portion of our grants, it was very important that it had a public element. When then we're not going out in public anymore, then it transferred, and virtual is considered a public element, or if you're sending materials out, that kind of thing. So you can say things like, with this, my goal is to have a 15% increase in my Instagram, or across all my social platforms. I want to gain X amount more followers to my YouTube channel. And then it's like, how are you going to figure that out? I am going to compare analytics. Those are those easy things that are very tangible numbers that you can produce. Okay. So the goal, I'm going to have 100 people attend this opening. Now, this is if 99 people show up, you did not fail. So at the end of everything, you have to do a final report. So you say, my goal was 100 people, and then wow, 200 people showed up, or only 50 people showed up, but other people sent surveys, and it was because of this XY, so just those kinds of things. Or if you're saying, I'm going to teach students, well, I'm going to survey them as to their experience, but I'm also going to survey their parents. And you can just like electronically send, and, how have you seen a change in your child?
Okay.
Those kinds of tangibles
And
Um,
I think with surveys too, it's always like on panelists I've sat on, again, thinking in terms of like what might break a tie and between two people who are like, I'm going to have surveys. If one of those people says like, I'm going to have surveys and here's the question I want to answer or ask, like including at least just a sample. You don't have to put the whole survey on there, but like it's super helpful when you have a question that's tied to whatever goal you're trying to meet. Like for the people who are like, I want people to feel something. A better version of that would be like, I want people to feel more optimistic about bears or something. And, like, and so then if you had the evaluation, it would be, you know, I'm going to send out a survey post bear performance thing that ask the question like, do you feel more positive or negative, or like they rate their experience or understanding of bears. I don't know, like, you know, but like getting more and more specific like that completes like the story too of your grant. Other things that you can evaluate are, you know, like the audience feelings and opinions, or reviews are a really good thing. Like if you make it a goal to get like one local newspaper to write a review about your project, I'd say that's a great evaluation tool. Specific demographics you want to reach, or percentages of those target demographics that turn up in your audience. So if you want like 70% youth to show up at a thing, like making sure that like you're measuring that, how many kids did show up. Was it all adults that came to your youth performance? You know, new skills or abilities.
oh, I'm sorry. And with all of that, at the end of the grant period, you have to do a final report saying how your project went, right? And so that's the same thing. Not only do we want to know that you completed and did what you said, you know, I'm like, send pictures, send stuff. We get excited. We want to see the final product of it. And the final report is as much for you as it is for us, where people, you set a goal and then you say, oh, I didn't quite reach that. You know, it wasn't this many people. So what did you learn from that? All of this is going through the grant process really organizes you as an artist, and it sets your goals. And oftentimes if people don't even get grants, they're just so motivated and organized now. And so they know the steps they need to take and they're doing it. And the final report is the backside of, you know what, this didn't work out quite the way I wanted. And I think next time I'd take this tact. You know, it's a self-reflection. It's reporting to us, but it's also self-reflection and building for yourself. And so
Building for your grant, because I feel like there's been plenty of things where, you know, I haven't completed the project to what I wanted to, but then I learned, and then I applied for another grant where I was like, I was not successful in this specific thing. I'm applying for this grant now to, you know, with what I learned, because I believe I can be successful, and like listing the things that you learned in that non-success before. Like, I feel like mistakes are great. I love reading grants where people are like, I made this mistake last time and I'm applying to like fix this mistake or like use what I learned. Those are the most exciting to me, because it's like, yeah, you get it. Like, you know, you're actually growing as an artist.
and you're moving forward. And those are two of the best experiences I've had, were at, you know, an art fair along the shore, and here's somebody in their booth and it was wonderful, and they didn't get the grant. And I thought, oh, you know, it's gonna break my heart. I'm here. She was like, thank you for all your help. It was the best thing I did, and I just moved forward and my life has changed. She's like, so it doesn't even matter that I didn't get it. But now she has all this experience, and now she's doing next level work. So even, and it's not personal, we have peer reviews. We're here to help. We're not here to defeat people. That is no part of any of this. We are here to develop. We are here to elevate people. We are here to You know, it's nothing but love, you know? So we don't want people to be intimidated to come and ask us for help. And if things don't, it's not a personal, if you don't receive a grant, it's probably because we had so many applicants. It's often our case, we have so many applicants that score within the funding range, but we just ran out of money. And so that's why I really do encourage people to also apply at the state level, to also look for other funding opportunities through foundations, or man, that little Google bar is awesome, grant opportunities, United States, or wherever. And cast a wide net. And the worst thing that can happen, they say no. That
Yeah.
is the worst. So if you just put it at that, it's not personal. They're at least not, I can speak for us and I can speak for Minnesota, that, you know, personal stuff doesn't come into play because we're not based on need. You can be rich, you can be poor, you can be whatever. You don't have to, you qualify. You have to live in the grant area. You have to be an artist. You can't, we had a technology grant for a while that everybody just wanted to buy a laptop with, that I had to be like a detective and go out on social medias. And I'm like, they're not an artist at all. This is, you know, they want this for a gaming platform. They want, you know, so.
A laptop would not be my first choice for making art. I would be more into a desktop, but I mean.
Well, and they've become more necessary. But at that point in time, the states really made an argument. The GOP was against it and they wanted to eliminate that funding. And they had pages and pages saying, what does a computer have to do with art? You know, there's
Everything now.
Everything now. So that, but at the time it was really a threat to this, to the funding. So, you know, we're always kind of adapting so that we don't want to lose this funding. Arts advocacy always.
Back to the, because I know we're way over time and I don't want to.
I know it feels about way over time, but yes.
Yeah, new skills or abilities that you develop as a result of the project. So again, what do you want to learn? Like some people will apply to, you know, teach or learn. Types of connections formed through the process, networking, you know, you can measure like, I want to successfully book, I don't know, this many events or secure these speakers for an event. Keeping within your budget parameters is one of my favorites because I never thought of it until I saw someone use it and I was like, that's great. Like, yeah, that is a really good goal to have, is like, I don't want to overspend. I want to use this money to its, you know, the capacity that I applied for. Any experience you get to have as a result of the artwork being completed, opportunities gained during the grant timeline, and then comprehension the audience might gain as a result of your work or your class or whatever you're applying for. Yeah. Try not to say, I will finish the project. Measuring questions allow you to think outside your project for a minute and look at the big picture of your artistry goals. Don't waste the opportunity to have fun with this question, because evaluation sounds gross at first, and then it's like, oh, I can like be creative and have fun with this. An example of a previous one for the art project organization grant specifically, this organization listed ticket sales count for the performance, the kind of people who actually showed up for the talk and social hour, verbal feedback, surveys they passed out to each attendee for each of the different events, post-event comments on their Facebook page, and sent via email and letter. They also, the nice part about this piece was they included a note on, we will use this information to design future programming that effectively meets the expectations and needs of our audiences. So again, that basic level of like, you've got the evaluation things, but then sometimes at the end of it, if you have space, it's nice to hear like, how are you going to use that evaluation? Like beyond to impress, you know, the funder or to like, you know, fulfill whatever criteria we have, like, why is it useful to you? It's always fun to hear. And then this last two slides is specific to organizations, but I'll just rattle it off and then we can close with like questions that are more specific. But for organizations who are looking to find artists and connect with artists, there's obviously the RFP, request for proposals or qualifications. That's a way people do things, although I had a weird experience with that recently. Checking out places that aren't art spaces that maybe invite artists, because I think a lot of the time like more emerging artists tend to be in like coffee shops or like, you know, those businesses that aren't specifically arts businesses, but that are looking to promote local artists. Ask your stakeholders or your people who use your organization, if you're not an arts organization, like who do they want to see? Who would be cool to invite into the community? Which again, when you have that element of like you ask the community, that's another thing you can put in your grant, where it's like we sent out this survey prior in preparation to this grant. People spoke, and this is what they want, and so we're applying because this is what was asked of us as an organization. I'm not sure why I'm reading this backwards, but other venues and places with similar goals. So I like to just browse other people's brochures and just see what's going on and what looks interesting. And then obviously social media, you can do hashtag, I don't know, jazz musicians, Minnesota, hashtag watercolorist, Minnesota, and sometimes find people who maybe aren't, you know, doing stuff in the public, but that you could invite to do something at your space.
And like-minded, and collaborating with other organizations and other artists is always a positive thing to reviewers, instead of being like, you know, it's not pie. It's like, you know, let's get everybody involved and get it going beyond just the artist communities. It should be part of all of our community.
And then again, for non-arts organizations, more specifically, don't just use it. I know like at the state arts board, at least, they don't allow commissioned work. So like you can't be like a hospital commissioning a sculpture, which was an application I read once. And we were like, well, this is the definition of a commission, you know, explicitly what doesn't get funded. And I don't know if we have a rule specifically against that, but you know, a way around being a commission is like by actually incorporating programming with that commission process. So instead of it just being like, I want paintings for the waiting room, like I want paintings for the waiting room in this space, and I'm going to do community workshops to create the artwork, and we're going to teach these specific lessons at those workshops. Then it becomes a whole thing that is beyond just that final output of a piece of art. Because I think a lot of what we're looking to fund isn't just like the piece of art. It's a lot of the time like what's the public benefit and impact of that work, and what's the process that goes into it. Obviously don't make it about money or fundraising, make it a genuine community experience. Again, for non-arts organizations, like quality of life for program participants, thinking about like, I don't know, senior citizen living facilities or schools, things like that, like thinking about like what would make life better and how can you incorporate art and artists to improve the morale of the people that you're serving.
And if you're in non-arts and you're kind of a dry, you're more of a STEM, get that artist to come in and say, how can you liven this up? You know, or, you know, Miri and I'm an antiquated graphic designer. She is a really active, up-to-date graphic designer, but That, and I loved when I had my graphic design business, because I'd have those people that like, I don't know how to make anything look engaging or pretty or not make something. So to engage those artists, if you want to have a festival, you want to have something that's going to, I don't know, lead to a fundraiser, you want to have your community involved, but you don't know how to go about it, go to the artists. They're outside the box thinkers.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's a, I can't remember. I feel like Adam Swanson might be an example of a painter who like was doing more of, like working with science organizations to do some of his quirky,
He
science.
does. I love his crossover, because he went out on science research boats out here in Lake Superior with all the scientists, and he has a very stylized way of painting. And he incorporated those too, and you see it around, and then not to go on a thing about Adam, but like recently, or one of the last grants that he had gotten was about animals that are at risk of disappearing here in Minnesota. And it's tied in somehow with the sciences. So you see a lot of like animals, but then you'll see industry in the background, and and it's how the two intersect. So, those outside thinkings are really interesting. So then the person who's very art focused might have a new interest than the science, and vice versa.
Yeah. And then the last piece is like use canvassing, surveys, community outreach. Do that before you do the grant application, and just see what ideas are already floating out there that could be of benefit. I think when I did a project with Zeitgeist a few years ago. That was my first public art project, and it was crosswalk murals. And we did a process of like literally door knocking on like the neighborhood around the area where we wanted to put these crosswalk murals, because they identified these dangerous intersections, and then had all this research on how you can get people to slow down if they're not like just racing through poorly designed intersections, and you put art out there. And so yeah, went in, shared that research with the community, and also like asked like, what would you want to see, because this is kind of like, this is right down the street from you, and you're gonna probably be seeing it more than anybody. And having those personal conversations and collecting like what are the themes that emerge. That was a whole process, but it definitely lended itself to influence signs. So,
and then on that, just to add to everyone, because Mary is especially good at this. Oh, it all went away.
yes, it's done.
Are you gone? Okay, bye. Having those press releases about this thing that you're going to do, keeping all that information, because that will serve you well in the next grant as well. So if your local paper has picked it up, or even more so, it's a wonderful thing.
That is pretty much I don't know mechanical terms, but it's the thing that held my whole career together and leveraged it was, press releases and the media coverage, because that's free most of the time. Like, well, yeah, all the time that's free. So when you get in the news, I think it just leads to more opportunities and more support for the stuff that you're working on. But throwing the link to our other workshops that are recorded in the chat, and that we have a workshop that we did on working with the press and working with the news. So that's a specific thing we've gone into. And then the rest of the individual artist stuff is there too.
Okay.
And there'll be more. And then in each, we have frequently asked questions on things. Look through each drop down, you'll have stuff. We do our best to answer the questions. and to make things clear, but we understand, this is what we wake up and do every day. And after a while, so, and we fully understand that it's not what you wake up and do every day. So we're happy to share our knowledge.
All right. Well, I appreciate it so much. I'm sorry I'm not an organization, but actually it's all been very interesting to me, and I am interested in community stuff. So
And it all overlaps. And so that when you're coming upon things in your community, because guess what? That's word of mouth. You say, listen, ARAC does that kind of thing. They're happy to talk with you, because none of us is an island, even in COVID. So,
Well, there's
you know,
like, I feel like another piece of my career as an artist too has been approaching organizations and them being like, well, we don't have funding for this. And I'm like, well, I know a grant, and like specifically for what I want to teach or what I want to do, like go to ARAC or go to the State Arts Board and apply as my fiscal sponsor, or apply as an organization doing some programming, and I can help, supplement with the, all the fun qualification stuff. But yeah, you can approach organizations too and let them know. And I have thoroughly enjoyed, like, I've enjoyed my work, I think, the most with non-arts organizations. Like I've worked with Lifehouse, and I used to work for ACO, and I still do a lot of stuff with them. Just different nonprofits that do like more people-centered service stuff. But they want to, again, improve the quality of life of the clients and the people that they're working with, or offer an event or a workshop, things like that. That's been the most rewarding, in my opinion, because then you're bringing art to a space that, you wouldn't expect to find it, or you wouldn't expect to experience it.
right. And that is, one of our, under our vision and mission is that it's accessible to everybody, that it's everywhere. Everybody should, and I love that. I love finding art in surprising places. I'll give you one. There was a grant for a while, and it was a woman, and she wrote these kind of small poems, almost like a haiku. And so she got a grant to print those little QWERTY boxes around, and she did Uber driving. And so she'd be like, I picked up like, some odd exchange she had. She had a little haiku of an exchange she had with someone who wasn't from the area. So you're just be walking along and you see those, and you get that, and you get a little story, and to me, it was just like, what a randomly delightful thing. That is just like a gift. That is such a gift. So everybody do that. A high note. But anyway, so thank you so much for listening to us, for sharing your beautiful headboard. And we'll record these. I'll get this to Cheyenne. It should be up probably within the week. I'm not sure what all she has to do to make it postable, but we'll have these continued. Now you're on the list. So as they come out, I'm just kind of sending them out to anyone who's ever had an interest. You can go back, take the time to review. Anyone who's watching in the future, go to our other workshops.
There you go.
Yeah, and then always just ask us. This is new. We'll get more polished. We're finding our way, but we're getting that information out there. And people in the future of organizations also, if you want in-person workshops, we provide free in-person workshops. We'd be happy to come to your community and talk with your people and get to know you better as well. So with that, should we all take the rest of the evening off?
Yeah.
I'm
I
gonna
hope
leave.
the migraine gets better. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's gone. It went away.
Yay!
It's modern medicine.
That's right. Art is medicine. All right. Thank you,
All right.
Miri. Thank you for putting this together. Bethany, thank you for joining us. Everyone have a lovely evening.
You too.
Thank you.